In marketing, keep things simple, be quick, don't hang on to things that are not working. Again, as community builders or as company people, these are some basics to look at. Are we really evolving as the time is, and are we moving fast?
It's important to understand that volunteers are required when you have community programs and programming in place.
So, welcome to another roundtable. This is, I think, our seventh roundtable. This we do every alternate week, where we try to pick one topic and understand what other community builders are thinking about that topic. The format, as I already explained, was we have few volunteer leaders. We do a pre-event catch-up, try to generate certain insights. Then I try to present those insights, in form of a presentation. Post that, we sort of split the whole attendee list into multiple Zoom rooms where everyone tries to go deeper into the topic, and then at the end we come together, where every table presents their learning to the other table, and then it is followed by a free flow discussion. So we'll continue the same format this time as well. And today we're going to discuss, about a very, very interesting topic. I think our pre-event catch-up was very insightful this time. So the topic is, how to structure your community team. I think the whole community space is now evolving, especially with many brands becoming community led, and more teams are going beyond hiring just one community manager. So as a brand scales their community team, how to think about it, how to structure the team, and also there are many community first brands where the monetization happens via the community directly. And in those cases, how do you structure your community team? Or is there something which, is there an ideal community team? So we're going to try to answer some of these questions and learn answers from you guys as well. So without taking a lot of your time, I'll just start sharing with my screen. Awesome. So, I'll straight away jump into how have we structured our community team. So, there is one community head, which sort of is part-time. I look at other functions as well, but I still, I'm very, very involved in community hood, which is our community. Then, I have a team of 4 people in my community team. There is Akshita, who you guys must have come across at some point. She's also moderating the chat section today. And she does a lot of operation work, including helping me with iterating on this presentation and managing the event. So she does a lot of work on moderation side and all the background work on events and making sure the community objectives are met. Then there is Siddharth, who helps us with video and creatives. Then there is Akshat, who does email marketing, digital marketing. Then there is Muskan, who helps in content. Muskan, of course, is a shared resource between the community team and I would say the marketing team, but our bigger focus is community over marketing as of now, because our product is still in early stage, and we feel community is the major focus for the whole growth team, and that's why the structure is currently in this way. Now, this is the internal community team structure at Community Hood. Then we also have, our super awesome volunteers. Currently, we have about 8 active volunteers who are helping us with the roundtables. And then there are 2 volunteers who help us with different initiatives. There is one initiative going on where we have an accountability group. This is primarily focused on, individual community builders or coaches who are looking to sort of find accountability buddies and exchange learnings with each other. So that happens every Saturday. Her name is Devanshi. And then there is one more volunteer who helps us with getting speakers from industry, and so that is how the volunteer team right now is structured. It's very flat right now, and since the size of the volunteer team is also relatively manageable, it's not like we have a tiering structured volunteer team. But I've seen a lot of companies where there are large volunteer teams. So I remember one of our panel discussion with where we had the founders of Head Start and a couple of other communities like Product Folks and a junior VC. There was a clear tiering as well in the volunteer teams. They had a full-fledged plan on how to onboard volunteers. How is it that you set expectations and everything. So I'll not go a lot deeper into it. One thing I would love to highlight here is a lot of times there is a boundary between someone who starts as a volunteer and ends up becoming a team member, or even in few cases a co-founder, or something at a head of community role. Very personal example for that is in my previous venture, we had one member. So I used to run a community of doctors, and one of our members on the app eventually ended up becoming one of the core part of our medical affairs team, and she was sort of managing and moderating the community as a full-time team member later on. We've seen few more examples where people end up also becoming co-founders when they start as a volunteer, and this notion is over time very, very clearly blurring with the onset of Web3 communities, where people genuinely start as volunteers, and the more they contribute, the more they sort of earn in terms of tokens, which sort of end up making them giving them more ownership in the community. And then some of the other teams that the community team at LikeMinds and Community Hood works closely with our customer support, sales, and product. So very, very actively our product team sees who are if there are certain bugs that are being reported, or if there are certain features which are can be suggested by the community. So very actively our product team also works closely, and then sales team also values the members who are already part of the community more than, of course, less sort of qualified community. When I say qualified, I mean qualified in terms of engaged, less nurtured, I would say, community builder. So this is how we have structured our community team. Now, since we are a very, very highly community-led organization, and we are relatively smaller in size today, this structure might not be relevant to a larger brand, like let's say Hash Growth. So, I'd shared the video of, a small part of the panel discussion that we had last month, where, Arun from Mo Engage, who runs this community called Hash Growth, which is a community of their potential clients, which are essentially product managers and growth managers. And what he told us in the panel was they had a community team of 4 people, including one head of growth, head of Hash Growth, which was Arun himself. Then there is one community lead, there is one operations engagement manager, and there is a community content specialist. Now, very interestingly, what this sort of highlighted was there is some common grounds around content and operations here. But for example, marketing team is completely separate, and there is also a separate content team that they had. So what they used to do was these guys who are, focused on operations and community content, they would generally work very closely with the content team and the marketing team to get, the community initiatives streamlined, and making sure that majority of people who are part of the community can get sort of value for which the Hash Growth community was created. So one of the core initiative was an academy that they run, and the goal for the community builder there is to make sure that the value delivery for the academy happens very, very clearly. So in that, they would work very closely with the content team to get the curriculum made. They would work very closely with the product team to, let's say, get the academy up and running. So that's why, in this case, they probably didn't have a huge content and marketing team as part of the community team. But, it's almost like community team works very similar to how a product manager works today, where, they would work with marketing team, growth team, engineering team. But in general, we've seen product teams are also relatively smaller in size, So like I see a lot of parallel from product management as a profession in terms of how, it's a multi-team interaction role. And then, they also have a Slack, like they were setting up a Slack community, and how to run different campaigns on to members who are part of the Slack community was also part of the role for community team. Now, these two examples I picked specifically because one was relatively smaller sized company and the other is a relatively larger sized company. And in both cases, there are at least 3-4 people in the community team, but there is a difference in, let's say here, like some of the roles like video and digital marketing are marketing heavy. Whereas, here there are more people who are getting community operations work done. In a lot of cases, community operations work as the team size grows. So for example, while at Curify, a very important role was moderation. So, it can then over time split into things like community moderation, membership relationship manager, member relationship manager. And, again, depending on the community, you can always come up with creative roles as well. Now, a very, very core part of community team is to coordinate with other teams. And I'll cover, a little bit of, the KPI discussion that we've had, in past, and, I've had with multiple other community builders. I think community teams in most cases as of today, they help other teams achieve their KPIs. So very, very often you'll see community teams having maybe, some North Star metrics for long term, but in most cases, they will have multiple smaller term, sort of quarterly metric or monthly metric, which are actually, sort of metrics which help either the marketing team to acquire more users, or metric that helps the product team to drive more engagement, or helps the support team to reduce the support queries. So, the community team essentially has to work very, very closely with the other teams in the organization. So for example, with the product team, where you can, as a community builder, give a lot of feedback and help the product team to improve the product. Sales team, you can, pass on the community, the leads from the community who are genuinely looking for your service that you're offering. So here it's more evangelizing than sales. Then, you need to work a lot with content team to get some of the things that are created in the community initiatives. Like, for example, this event is being recorded. So, we work very, very closely with the content team and try to, repurpose a lot of this content on social media later on. Then, of course, graphics team, also a very, very similar role that I just described. And then, of course, there is marketing team who would, help the sort of community team to get more people into the event. And, also, the community team helping the marketing team to achieve some of their objectives, like getting more members in the community, or, to try out the product if it's a separate product in the community. Now, this is a very, very interesting framework, and I can have a separate session on this. but I just thought I'll quickly touch upon this. Vineet yesterday mentioned in our pre-event catch-up that we should just at least touch upon it, because this will help us understand how different communities are structured based on the key business objective that they are trying to achieve, at least in that quarter, or in a lot of cases even in long term. So spaces is basically, it stands for support, product, acquisition, contribution, engagement, and success. So this was a framework which was coined by David Spinks, and it's a very, very simple framework where the terms on the left essentially define what is the key objective that you are trying to achieve, what is the key value that the community is trying to create for the business, for the brand. So there are few examples of how different brands have leveraged community in different ways. So SaaS companies like Asana and Atlassian have a huge focus on using community as a way for members to sort of support each other. So a huge sort of value add in this case is reducing the burden on the support team, whereas the community members also answer the queries which are asked by the other members in the community. Then product, a lot of cases people get ideas from the community, a huge focus. In many cases, like D2C brands also do this, where they have their own inner circle community where they test out initial product with them. They sort of sample out the product and take feedback from them, and then sort of distribute it in the masses depending on the feedback. Then a lot of communities are acquisition heavy, where people, again, it happens a lot in D2C brands or consumer brands. Even in edtech, this happens quite often, where people try to generate a lot of mentions, a lot of referrals from the community, where if you really serve someone well, they can become your advocator, and that word of mouth helps you in getting more members. So in those cases, the DNA of community is a bit different than the other two examples. So similarly, in case of edtech, contribution or content creation is very, very common, where your community becomes the main product itself in many cases. Because let's say if your members are really creating awesome content, it actually becomes a way for you to package it and really give it out to the market. Similarly, there is engagement and success. Success is essentially members really helping the other members becoming successful. So we've seen, like, for example, in Notion, there are so many members who would create Notion templates and share them with other members in the Notion community. And those are being used by the other members. So this was very, very quickly the spaces model. Now, why I want you to remember this is because different communities have different objectives, and in a lot of cases there are mix of these objectives as well, where let's say a community might be focused on acquisition, contribution, as well as success. So at Communityhood, which is focused on success, I would say our core metric is success, but we also get a lot of help in terms of contribution, where members create content in terms of whatever discussions we are having in events. That is a form of content that we try to leverage on social media as well. That helps us in member acquisition as well. So these are some of the metrics that we, like our community team at LikeMinds and Communityhood, observe on a regular basis. So new members onboarded, the number of the percentage of members who are engaged, the percentage of members or the actual members who are participating in events, how many repeat members are participating, number of contributions made by members on a daily basis, weekly basis, what is the daily active user, weekly active user, monthly active user. So how many people are coming at what frequency on the platform. But then this last one is number of CQLs, which is again a concept that I picked from one of the books written by David Spinks. So CQL is essentially community qualified lead. So like there is marketing qualified lead, we've seen community qualified leads are much more qualified in our case as well, because if they are already part of our community, they've already experienced the LikeMinds product, and that helps us to explain like those leads much simply. So that helps our sales team to also target those people more often, and we prioritize our members' requests over, let's say, a cold leads request. In a lot of cases, if someone reaches out to us as a cold lead, we actually tell them that why don't you join the community, experience the platform experience, and then we try to sort of convert them into a client. So for us, these are some of the metrics, and that determines how we operate our community, and that determines how the community team works a lot with the other teams as well. Vineet, Manohar, they've been very, very consistent with us. So Vineet, as you all know by, now he's a community consultant, helps a lot of brands in their community strategy. Manohar is community manager at Mentza, and he also runs an independent community called 90ml Talks. Saurav is head of community relations at Learn for Cause. Then there is Nirav, who is founder of BRANDfluenzers community and School of Solopreneurs. Then there is Ruchi, who is founder of HEN, which stands for Her Entrepreneurial Network. She's been building this community for more than a decade now. She started from Facebook, and I think now her community has matured a lot, where she not only runs that Facebook, but has an independent platform as well for her community, and she sort of runs it very, very actively. Then there is Pratiksha. She manages 3 Facebook communities with very, very large number of members.
Yeah, so I had 7 people in my room, of which one of them did not speak. So we had Sameer, Siddharth, and Vikas, who have an active, community team. I mean, Siddharth has a 14,000 member plus community called G Plus based out of Guwahati. I mean, it's a very hyper-local thing. And he's planning to hire one community manager. And since it's a media company, they have a social media team, a content team to make sure that the community is engaged. They have a challenge in terms of engagement and how exactly this thing can be structured. All right. So right now they're at a very nascent stage. How big is your team? How big is your volunteer team? Wala story aaya hi nahi udhar. All right. When I speak about Sameer, so Sameer has a community of students. They have multiple small groups in place, which is there. But most of the students, it's part of the financial planning, financial education program. So Sameer has done multiple boot camps where, they got the students on board. And right now he's trying to structure the place. And the fact of the case is what Sameer mentioned very clearly is that students want to learn. They are okay with small stipend, but once they learn from it and they get the pat on the back, that's the motivation which comes into place. And about Vikas runs a elder seniors and elder engagement platform. So they have a 5-member team and 3 of them are part of community, and considering the fact that seniors cannot be given much more responsibility. All right. So if anybody volunteers and come, they talk to them at this point of time and make sure that they are taking the initiative, but through WhatsApp and their app internally, you are doing it. So there is a lot of parallels between what Community Hood is right now and what Vikas is doing. I mean, Community Hood is a great, benchmark for him to look at that, how exactly this thing spans out. Now, coming over, we had Tarun, who's part of a professional speakers community. It's a member-led, based stuff. So right now it was a society being converted into a Section 8 company. So for 150 members, obviously they get access to the 14 countries and the events which are happening. So it is more of I would say a society-led stuff. 150 people each interacting with each other, and they have a structure in place where the communication is being put. So it's at a very private community per se at this point of time, very niche and curated. Mandeep has been part of 5 communities, 2-3 interest-based, school, alumni, this thing, adventure and car sort of stuff. But what he shared is like he's part of an electronics and telecommunication group, as well as Punjab Chamber of Commerce. So where they are still ideating and structuring it, they have done a lot of volunteer events. But at this point of time, they haven't come across a challenge where a community team needs to be in place. So as they scale, they will have a structure in place. But one of the biggest takeaway from the table was like listening to each other and the conversation which was going on. It makes sense to have a community team structure and a volunteer team structure in place along with the SOPs for the event, so that once it scales, it becomes easier for you to onboard the members, both the volunteers as well as the internal team members, and make sure that the event is running in the autopilot mode. That's the holistic view of the conversation from my table.
Got it.
So we were 9 people in the room. Akshita being one, so 8, and out of which we had 1 or 2 people who couldn't share much. So I'll go ahead with what kind of conversations happened. Saujanya runs an organization. It's an NPO where they work with children. They have 2 kinds of system. They have one corporate sector where they have program managers, they have admin staff to manage inventory, etc. They have facilitators. On the other hand, they do have a set of volunteers. These volunteers pretty much they attract through universities, college students, because they're working with children and it's an NPO. So she did mention that it is convenient and people do come and they kind of support them, which is great. So that's one thing that we learned from Saujanya. Saujanya, if I'm missing out something, feel free to barge in. When we discussed this with Saujanya, the next conversation we had was, for NPOs, we have seen that it's a lot more easy to attract volunteers, but what is happening in the private sectors? So private sectors, while we were discussing that there could be hiccups, the conversation came to a point where it was, if we share the purpose of the community, volunteers may want to come forward and work. So the question for all of us community builders here is, are we sharing the purpose of our communities enough for volunteers to come in and work with our organization? So that was one good takeaway. Right. Then we had Rajat with us. He's setting up a community for exporters because it's a fairly new group community that they're working on. So he's managing it single-handedly. There is no team as such. However, the community is functioning on Mighty Network. Mighty Network is another platform to kind of put the community together. He's in a process to explore which kind of platforms to work on. Then we had with us Ahmed. Ahmed has an app and they've built a community of 1,000+ people in 1 month. I think wo sunke hi I was flat. 1 mahina mein 1,000 log is like quite a deal, right? But so they do have a backstory. They've worked on it for 2 years. They're doing lots of things now. But things that he said that works for them is, in marketing, keep things simple, be quick. Don't hang on to things that are not working. Again, as community builders or as company people, these are some basics to look at. Are we really evolving as the time is, and are we moving fast? Of course, community building is about marketing. So question for all of us is, how much are we focusing on our marketing strategies, and are we keeping things simple? Are people able to understand us? Which again goes back to point 1, that is the purpose being communicated. Right? In terms of team, the team is still building up, fairly new. Currently 4 people in the team, and they're working to build it up further. Then we had with us Aditya, who is supporting a spiritual community on Facebook. They have a group of some 3 lakh people there. How does it work? It works with 1 admin sitting in UK and 8 moderators in different parts of the world. It's a completely volunteer-led group, but that's because of interest. They connect with each other on that interest. They're passionate about it. They're coming together to support. Then we had with us Surbhi. Surbhi runs an NPO called Surbhi. I forgot the name. I know that it's for children, women. So it's for educating women with hygienic products, etc. while Surbhi is working with educating women and also building the product, one thing that she bring in very interesting was, in her organization they partner with various other organizations on local and national level. Like for example, she's working out of Indore, and because she's talking about hygiene for women, so she works with the Indore cleanliness unit. I kind of not getting the name, but are we partnering with communities and other organizations who can in turn empower our community and push us perform better? So even that is a good space to think about organization structure. So एक होता है कि हमारा खुद का organization structure है internal, then एक है volunteer और एक है ये partners. So affiliates, partners, yeah. Like how many of us are working towards building that kind of a structure to empower us together?
Yeah, I remember some of the larger brands. I'm sure you would have all heard of Pepper Content. So the community lead there actually, what he writes on Twitter is actually, community and partnerships lead. So, in a lot of larger brands, you'll see it being a shared responsibility of the community team.
Yeah. So, and in my personal experience, running a community from a Facebook freemium group to a paid group now and having our own networking platform, we also have that same experience. We have one group of team, which is our internal team that is on our payroll. We have a team of people who volunteer for us. They are our experts, mentors. And then we have a set of partners for various kind of support system for our members. So we are working on all these three verticals. However, we're still working to set up a structure where we can build a strong volunteer program, being a for-profit model company and not an NPO. So yes, that still remains a point of work for us on hand.
All right, Manohar, last but not the least.
Yeah, I think today's table was very fascinating. Two things I want to share. One is I want to thank each one of them because everyone shared. And that's really important, because the topic was not something that everybody had structures already in place, but people overcame their inhibitions and said, we don't have a structure, but we want to. And I think that's a great spirit. Second is, I empathized with each one of them when they said कि यार हमारे पास तो team ही नहीं है और structure नहीं है, because that's, I think, a reality at this point, that the conviction around communities is gradually evolving. So due to the lack of strategy or that kind of conviction from the business, there weren't very established structures, but each one of us was able to share some key points, which I'll try to share. On the table, we had Vikrant, Devraj, Siddharth, Shankar, we had Dipisha, we had Anushri, and each one of Manny also, who runs the student study abroad aspirants community. Very diverse communities, and some of the key things that we were able to come up with. The first thing was, in case of Manny, it's there aren't volunteers because the nature of community is such that it requires professional advice. So they have trainers and counselors, and it makes business sense to not rely on a volunteer program because it's about giving the right advice. So that really opened up a thread that do all brands need volunteer programs in the first place? And for what do they need it is more important to understand. Just for the sake of efficiency or cutting costs, if you use the volunteer program in a wrong context, it may backfire more than being useful to you. So that was one key insight. And at the same time, when you really give value through these counselors and trainers, your members bring acquisitions themselves. They start recommending people. So it's very important to see if you really need a volunteer program and where do you need it. The other thing was, it's important to understand that volunteers are required when you have community programs and programming in place. In our case, there weren't much programs which were launched. So the limited way the teams are utilizing volunteers is ideation or sort of referrals. And the third could be some sort of content contribution. In case of Devraj, he is part of a hyper-local media organization where people share anything useful that they come across. So it's like in a very traditional media organization, that's a paid ground reporter, right? But here it's citizen journalism that is happening, and all these people are taking initiative and publishing that information on that space which is created by Devraj and G+. So there they don't have to work much hard to ignite the volunteer spirit, but to maintain it and cultivate it, of course, it's a difficult thing. We had Deepisha from New York who shared about the Slack community that they have at this company called Alpha, and the people contribute there. But she's mostly doing things on her own, and she relies more on tools rather than people. So if there are functions or tasks to be done, having a tool is easier, and there is enough tool and tech infrastructure available for diverse functions. And that is, I think, something I saw across all members, that there is an affinity toward tools over volunteers. So do you really need volunteers when you can get the same thing done from tool is also a strategic choice you want to make. And on that note, personally, I want to share a link which some of you might find useful. It's a very interesting book called Meaningful Inefficiencies. It's in the context of civics and government trust. Now, the key reason for communities is to build communities for brands is trust and belonging. Now, often people are very quick to jump on technologies and making things efficient. But what you lose in that process is opportunities for connection. You sort of overcome the imperfections, but you lose trust because people are not really able to engage. It becomes very transactional. And on that note, a lot of times people say that you shouldn't look at your community like a machine, but you should really look at it like a living organism, and different components are contributing. It's a very alive and dynamic thing. So with that tool question, this insight sort of came for us. And finally, I think we had Siddharth from Pratilipi, who has a more structured community. Because there are multiple languages on Pratilipi. Pratilipi is a big platform, but there they don't have staff or dedicated resource for a function. They have as per language. They have 12 languages and 28 professionals working in the team. But now they are contemplating in creating a dedicated person for events, particularly create that kind of specialization. But in the early stage, it was like one community manager per language doing all things from content, events, and everything, and utilizing super users. Now, super users are the most fertile group for roping in volunteers, and that is something that they do. They do product interactions with them. They take ideas from them on a monthly catch-up basis. Similar thing is done by Anushri, where they get on a Gmeet call for their brand page on Instagram. What kind of new things should be posted? What is trending? So it becomes a very efficient way of crowdsourcing ideas and catching the pulse through this focus group of volunteers, which is coming out of the super users. So largely these were the things. And there was one more thing which Anushri, I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing the name. But she shared, Anisha shared about how to really activate volunteers. And I think that was insightful. Just giving a call out for volunteers is not going to work. You have to run some kind of challenges, context, and create certain incentives for volunteers where they participate. Now, one may argue that if that is really volunteering because they're coming for prize, but we all know that it's not really the top two prizes for which people participate. So if you want to activate a good volunteer program, it's important that you make that kind of an intervention in your community where people feel motivated to participate. It's not only the rewards, but the design of your community where volunteers will find space. So broadly, these were the things, and thoroughly enjoyed hearing all of them, and I really thank them once again.
So yeah, thank you so much for coming. As usual, it was lovely having you all. It was lovely hearing all of your views.